You have to understand that it's normal to feel like an imposter, especially in the beginning. The problem is we very rarely see people in the beginning.
Don't let these other people dictate what you should and shouldn't be, should and shouldn't try, can and cannot say. It really is important for you to just be honest with yourself and with your own mind, body, heart, and soul with what you know you're here for.
Next Level Nation, welcome back to another very special, as always, weekly live Next Level You podcast. We are live in Next Level Nation right now. For week number 96, we're going to talk about overcoming imposter syndrome and self-doubt. I think this is something that everybody deals with in some way, shape, or form. I think everybody handles it a little bit differently, but since I feel like a lot of our community is maybe coaches or business owners that might struggle with this, we thought we would talk about it today. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday, everyone. Welcome to the live weekly podcast. 96 weeks in a row. We're celebrating. It's awesome.
Yes.
It's wild.
Yes.
But we're here. We're ready to deliver some value. Do you want to start with your first point?
I will start. Let me just move my notes here. Okay, cool. So I was on a podcast the other day, and one of my favorite questions, and one of the questions I get the most when I'm on other podcasts, is how do you make money as a podcaster? And this person and I had a conversation, and I said, well, you have to think of it this way. For us, we coach. So whether it's business coaching, lifestyle design, peak performance for Alan, or whether it's podcast coaching for me, we have found a problem that our listeners and our community have, and we have found a way to solve that. And he said, yeah, the only thing is I'm not really good enough to coach yet. And I said, okay, let's talk about it for a second. What are the common questions you get from the people that either listen to your podcast or the people that you have on or your friends? And he said, people are asking me all the time how to start a podcast. And I said, oh, interesting. If only you knew somebody who had a successful business helping other people start podcasts. I can't imagine one, but if you did, I'm sure you could really go somewhere with that. And he said, yeah, but you got to think, Kev, I've only done 20 something episodes. I'm not nearly as far along as you. And I said, so what? If you are 2 or 3 steps ahead of somebody, you can help them. I said, you have to start coaching people who are very, very, very new, because that is going to really show you that you're not an imposter. It's going to show you that you actually know way more than you realize. I have had so many conversations with clients about this. You don't have to know it all. You don't have to be 900 episodes in. You don't have to have a $1 million business. You only have to be 1 or 2 steps ahead of the people that you're helping. And I think that's an important distinction. We lose sight of the fact that when we started this journey, and if you're watching or listening, when you started this journey, you probably knew a certain amount of stuff. And that was your baseline. Now you're a year, 2, 5, 10 years in. Look back and imagine if you had just started. What are the common questions you get? And that'll really highlight the fact that you're not an imposter. I know that one of the wonderful things for Alan and I, being on other podcasts, you realize pretty quickly that we forget how far along we are. I mean, if you've been on somebody's show and it's their 5th or 20th or 30th episode, you remember, oh yeah, I remember what it was like to be 30 episodes in. And it brings you back and it takes you out of either imposter syndrome or just the law of familiarity. So find somebody, an example of somebody, your old work, whatever it may be, and use that as perspective. Find somebody new, and then it'll help you realize how far along you are, and it'll be easier to shake off imposter syndrome. I think most of us will deal with imposter syndrome maybe for a long time, for some point in our lives, but that's one thing that's helped me a lot is coaching other people that are very, very early on. A lot of the things that seem like common sense to you or common practice to you, other people have never heard of them before. And that's okay. That's wonderful. That'll help you build confidence in your own skills.
If you're only ever around people that are far ahead of you, you'll feel less than. If you're only ever around people that are you're ahead of than, you'll feel more than. And neither one is really true. And neither one is really helpful because neither one is the full picture. There's a concept called plus minus equal to. There's people that you pour into that you are ahead of than. So this is Next Level University. So let's say you're at level, I'm 33 years old, so we'll just say that. I'm at level 33. I have one client who's 24. I can help him a lot at achieving his dreams because I'm many levels ahead. But I also get helped by other people who are ahead of me. If Bill Gates and I are in a room, I'm going to be asking Bill Gates about business, not the other way around. And so it's plus, minus, equal to, and it's important to have all three so that you can stay. It's like the people you helps you reflect on and remember what it was like to be a beginner or a novice or an amateur or even an expert if you're a master or a grandmaster in this analogy. So it gives you perspective, but then, making sure that you're also around extraordinary people that are ahead of you, it also keeps you humble. And then you also have your dream team, which is people that are sort of pitching and catching. If you only ever played tennis with people that are professional tennis players, you're going to think you're worse than you are. If you play against, let's say, a 4-year-old, you're going to think you're better than you are. And so it's really important to understand this when it comes to imposter syndrome and self-doubt. Kev, question for you, my man.
Yeah.
How many episodes of the podcast did it take for you to truly not feel like an imposter?
So first of all, before I say anything, my laptop is jeffing a little bit, so I don't know if you can hear me or whatever, but everything is like blinking and everything's going to be fine. Roughly 150.
I can hear you fine, just so you know.
Okay,
and
thank you.
see you fine. There's no issues.
Yeah, everything's jeffed on my end. Roughly 150 podcast episodes. That's something I'll go into a little bit later, but for the vast majority of the beginning of this, I felt not enough. I felt lack. I felt imposter syndrome. Who am I to have a podcast? Who am I to be doing what I'm doing? But it's just the reps.
Okay. I think.
Oh yeah, no, everything's jeffed over here. It's gonna be fine.
I'll hammer my next point and
Thank you.
let me know how it's going. All right. So I don't know if I've told this story or not publicly, but I was not a naturally athletic person when it came to muscle mass. I'm an ectomorph, and I think I was a natural distance runner, but I was not a natural bodybuilder in terms of it coming easy to me. I was an ectomorph. Tall and lanky is the way to view this. And when I was in college, I believe I was a sophomore at the time, and I would still go back to my hometown because my college was only 30 minutes north of where I grew up. And I would go to these parties in our hometown, and there was this one guy who I knew, and he was in unreasonably good shape for our age back then. He was handsome and tall and, successful. His parents owned a really successful restaurant that he worked at, and he just was someone who was charismatic and funny and good looking. And I remember when I was really not into fitness as much as I wanted to, I was letting myself down in the fitness arena, and I was naturally lanky, and I was in college, and I was not focused on that. I came home, and he came to this party, and I'll never forget this one situation where I saw him and how charismatic and how bright and how really on fire this guy was in his life and in his physique. And I remember I had to actually leave the room. Not because he was a bad person, but because I was so letting myself down in the fitness arena. And, I gained some weight, but it was like being skinny fat type of thing early in college. So I went and I ended up sort of contemplating. And I was like, oh my God, I've really let myself down. And I was in guilt and shame, and I was sitting there. One of my other friends actually came to make sure I was okay. And I ended up talking to him and just saying, I got to get my stuff together with fitness. And it wasn't long after that I actually started lifting, which was really cool. So sophomore year and junior year and then senior year in college, I lifted weights very consistently. Sophomore year, it was a little bit spotty. Junior year, I was very, very, very consistent. And then senior year as well. And 10 years later, I ended up seeing the same person at a wedding. And at this point, I had been a fitness model, fitness coach, fitness competitor, and I had won one of my shows. I had done 3 different natural men's physique shows, and this person said, hey man, so good to see you. I can't believe you do those shows. Congratulations that you won one. I saw your photos. You were ripped, man. You were jacked. Like, I could never do that. And I remember thinking to myself, you could never do that? I remember thinking, this person that inspired the hell out of me and really gave me the mirror all those years ago doesn't even believe in himself enough to do what I've done. And it really flipped the script for me and made me realize that, holy crap, he now has imposter syndrome and self-doubt the same way that I did 10 years ago. And now I'm the mirror for him. And so the point here that I want to make is that no matter how good looking or successful or in shape someone is, no matter how amazing you think their life looks, yeah, they might be very confident in certain arenas, and I certainly was, confident in other arenas, certainly not fitness. But my point here is that you have to realize that everyone struggles with imposter syndrome in something. Now, I would be lying to all of you if I said that I struggled with imposter syndrome in certain things. I don't in certain things, but I definitely did back then in fitness in particular. I grew up lanky and skinny and not naturally strong and muscle bound. And so just understand you're not alone and realize that everyone struggles with self-doubt and imposter syndrome in something. And I think that is the first step to really overcoming it. It's just realizing it's not just you.
Alan, imagine this. You could snap your fingers and you could be back at that party and you could be talking to that version of Alan. What would you tell him that would help you get through that and maybe change the trajectory of things?
I would tell him you have a core value of fitness, which is why you're upset right now. This other person is living more in alignment with their fitness goals, and the envy that you're feeling, the jealousy that you're feeling is actually your soul telling you you're capable of it too, and that's what you really want. I believe that envy is the soul tapping you on the shoulder saying that's what you value. That's what you want. That you can do it too. You can be better. And be careful, because if it's something you can't change, then obviously that's another story. But this is something that I absolutely could do and did do. I genuinely was in better shape than this person ever has been, and certainly in better shape than he was back then. And so it was the soul. I would say, Alan, this hurts right now, but this is your opportunity to change. And this is your opportunity to start taking fitness more seriously, which is really what your emotions are trying to tell you right now. And so lean into that. Use this to get better.
It's great advice.
Thank you, brother.
If only you were able to do that, If only it was that easy where you could go back and do it. So I'll never forget my buddy, Cope Daddy, shout out to Cope Daddy, Andrew. He texted me one day when I was on the road and said, "Hey, I know you're practicing a lot of fear chasing, and if you really, really want to fear chase, I'm going to England in a few months. You should come." And I was like, definitely not going to happen. Not going to get on a plane and fly across the ocean. Number one biggest fear, planes. Number two biggest fear, sharks. Plane over the ocean, too much. But I ended up doing it. There was a good price on tickets, and I was like, all right, let's do this. So we went to England, and one of the things we did when we were in England, there's something called the O2 Arena, and it's one of the biggest arenas in England. And there's this really cool tour you can do where you put on this jumpsuit and you watch this video, and I think they give you a helmet and boots and all this stuff. And you go outside and they strap you to a guide wire and you walk all the way up to the very top of this giant stadium. And it's windy and it's tall and your legs are tired and you're walking up the side of effectively a building. And you can see the entire city of London, which was just wild. But when you start walking up, you're harnessed in and you have your guide wire, and there's somebody behind you who also has a guide wire on the rope, and there's somebody in front of you who has it. So if you're a quarter of the way up and you decide, you know what, I don't want to do this. This is too high. I'm scared. The only way down is up. You can't just turn around and go down because there's a bunch of people behind you. You have to go all the way over. And I believe that imposter syndrome is the same thing. Alan said it. In order to get over my imposter syndrome when it came to podcasting, you have to do more to feel less. And I believe that hike up the side of that building is the same thing. Yeah, it's scary. And yeah, it's nerve-wracking. But the only way to get out of that discomfort is to keep going. It's one of those things where, okay, let's have this conversation. I feel like an imposter as a podcaster. What are my options? One, be the guy in 10 years who says to everybody, yeah, I used to be a podcaster, right? That's option one. Number two, try my best and fail. That's an option. Number three, focus on learning, focus on small improvements, and focus on showing up and continue building my skills. And those are three options. One of those options is not super empowering, one is kind of empowering, and the third one is very empowering. You have to understand that it's normal to feel like an imposter, especially in the beginning. The problem is we very rarely see people in the beginning. If you're watching this in this private Facebook group, that was impossible when Alan and I started this podcast together because we didn't have a private Facebook group. It wasn't even the same name. We didn't have these microphones. We weren't in the same, I wasn't in the same state. You know, there's so many things that are different. We didn't have the amount of listens. When you first start something and you're comparing to years and years of other people's experience, it's natural to feel imposter syndrome. Very similar to fear and fear chasing. It's not a sign for you to stop. It's a sign for you to face your fears. If you're afraid of something, that makes you human. If you push through that fear and you show courage, that makes you successful. That makes you fulfilled. That makes you aligned. That makes you a winner. And again, Alan's going to reiterate this. I will too. It's normal to have imposter syndrome. I would say it's more normal than it is not to. Especially now, like social media, podcasting, there's so many opportunities to be seen, and we're all afraid somebody's going to say something about what we're talking about. It's normal to have it. You just got to keep going. And then eventually you'll be giving the same advice to somebody else.
Fire. So have you ever been told, you're welcome, brother. Have you ever been told you're not good enough or you're not smart enough? I have someone who I coach that was told from a young age that she wasn't smart enough to go to a particular school. And this person had many siblings that were very academically inclined and lived in a family that had the paradigm that education's super important, which it is, and that's awesome. But she was told that she wasn't smart enough to go to these other high-end schools. And when I heard that, that really bothered me. But this person's reaction to it was really, really powerful. What she could have done is what Kevin mentioned, which is kind of give up. Or she could use it as fuel to become better. So instead, what she did is she said, no, I'm going to go to this school and I'm going to work harder. So she worked way harder. She was more organized. She was more focused. She ended up putting in way more hours than all of her siblings because she wanted to compensate for the fact that she had imposter syndrome and self-doubt. She didn't feel like she was smart enough. So what did she do about it? She decided to put in more work. I remember I was in book club this past weekend. Kevin, you actually don't know this, but I said this to everyone in book club. I said, Kevin's one of the most hardworking people I've ever personally met. He executes against 20 plus habits every single day and never misses. And he tracks 24 things a day every single day. He might track and execute against more habits consistently than anyone on earth. I know that sounds insane, but it might be true. I don't know everyone on earth, so I can't tell for sure, but it's definitely on the high end. And I asked everyone in book club, I said, would that be possible or probable if Kevin never struggled with self-doubt? Would that be possible or probable if Kevin never struggled with the insecurity of being short? One of the reasons Kevin worked so hard in the gym, and I know he would say this, is because he was short and he wanted to make up for that. Right? And so we think self-doubt and imposter syndrome is this terrible thing that plagues us every day. It is if you use it that way. But what if you, and I told Kev this recently, I said, I have a chip on my shoulder too. And I'm not saying that the chip running me is a good thing. What I'm saying is when you evolve and you grow and you realize you have a chip on your shoulder because you weren't believed in or because you didn't have a dad or because you had a stepdad who didn't want kids or whatever, or because your dad left when you were young like Kevin. Whatever that chip is, I said, Kev, don't take the chip off, man. That chip is your greatness. Instead of the chip running you, just run the chip. Right? You better believe Tom Brady has a chip on his shoulder. You better believe this person I told you about whose siblings were quote-unquote smarter has a chip on her shoulder. But she used the chip to work harder. She overcompensated for the self-doubt and the imposter syndrome. And now because of that, she will be far more successful than all of them combined, in my opinion. Okay? So one of the reasons why you're struggling with self-doubt and imposter syndrome is that you don't understand that it's actually your superpower. It's actually can be used to fuel you and motivate you. Ask yourself, think of someone who's extremely motivated, very, very motivated, very driven. I can promise you that person has deep pain in their past. they were told they weren't good enough, or they had sexual trauma or physical trauma or emotional trauma, and they overcompensated. And that overcompensation is where their greatness lives, as long as they can now run that instead of having the trauma run them. So everyone goes through trauma to some extent. Even if you have no trauma, that ends up being your trauma because you had such an easygoing childhood. So my point here is you got to focus more on what you're capable over the long term. And if you struggle with self-doubt, you have to turn that on its head and start using it instead of letting it use you.
I think a powerful question, Alan, and I was thinking of this when you were speaking, is and I'm thinking if I asked myself this, would it have changed anything? I don't know. But if you asked yourself out there right now, what would have to happen in order for me not to feel like an imposter anymore? What would have to happen? Because I think when it comes to, okay, if you have a goal weight, maybe you'd say, I'll feel like I am in shape when I hit this weight. I'll feel financially free when I hit this number. I'll feel successful in terms of relationship when this happens. What's the measure for an imposter? What's the measure for mastery,
I think that the times when I felt like an imposter was when I was outside of alignment with my best self. So, but it's also interesting because that was me in some ways in alignment with my best self. So I also had imposter syndrome when I saw Brendan Burchard speak.
Yes, I remember that.
I felt like I belonged in the audience, but when I thought that I was a great speaker and then I saw Brendan Burchard, he is world class as a speaker. Oh my God. And now I bet you I wouldn't feel like an imposter around him, genuinely. But that's also because now 200 speeches, 1,000+ coaching calls, hundreds of team huddles, 96 weeks in a row of this. All of that, by the way, the moment we came home from Brendan Burchard and I had imposter syndrome, we turned on the jets after that.
Yeah.
It's almost like imposter syndrome is a necessary part of the process. And yeah, I don't know if it'll ever fully go away, but I do think it will go away more and more and more as you become more aware of who you are, as you self-actualize. The only way to overcome imposter syndrome, I think, is to self-actualize. That's my answer.
Hi everyone, I just wanted to take a moment and discuss my experience with Your World Within Live and encourage you all to go to Next Level Live that is coming up next month. I definitely was scared out of my mind. It was the first time meeting just about everybody there, and I had only been coaching with Kevin and only had met him virtually. I ended up staying with another member of the Next Level Nation, and just it really propelled my experience forward and has really given me the growth opportunities and the abilities to be where I am today. It's also opened the doors for me to be on the Next Level University team, and I just really can't say enough about these full immersion experiences. So I encourage you to buy your ticket for Next Level Live. I can't wait to see all of your guys' feedback and watch all of you guys experience what I got to experience a couple of years ago. Thanks, guys. Bye.
What is the definition of self-actualization? Excuse me.
The soul's recognition of growing to its true potential. And it's different for every single person, I believe. And I think fulfillment is what indicates that. And so when I felt bad after I saw that person in shape and charismatic, it's because my soul was saying, you want to be like that too. You've been Jeffin. And so I had to go and contemplate, what was my contemplation? It was, how do I do better? I got to start going to the gym, and hopefully this is resonating with people, because I think that truth, when we hear it, we know it, even when it's painful. I'm going to quote Jordan Peterson randomly here. He said something once that really was powerful, and I think that it'll circle back to imposter syndrome. He said that when you hear a motivational speaker that's really overly positive, you get all hyped up and you're all excited, but then you go home and the deeper, wiser part of your nature knows that a lot of that was like the painting over of rotten wood. It's not really fixing the actual problem. And so Kevin and I, we've leaned into the heart-driven but no BS, because we definitely understand there's toxic negativity out there, but there's also toxic positivity. And the toxic positivity is you're going to be fulfilled and happy with no work at all, and self-discipline doesn't work, and everybody loves working out. It's overcorrecting the toxic negativity when the truth is in the middle. And so Kevin and I don't want to sit here ever again and we don't want to be the painting over of rotten wood. What we want to do is say, okay, this wood is rotten. Why is it rotting? So we're not saying only hang out with people better than you. No, that's going to degrade your self-worth. And by better than you, I mean ahead of you, not intrinsically better than you. And then, only hang out with people who you can mentor, who you're ahead of. No, that's going to inflate your self-worth. You need to have a holistic understanding. Life is super hard, yes, but also sometimes it's awesome and super fulfilling as well. So life is a constant dance between two extremes, and I think that what Kevin and I are trying to do with everyone and with ourselves is to learn how to dance inside the truth, and not just the whole truth, but our own unique perspective of the truth. And so to bring this back to self-doubt and imposter syndrome, and to Kevin's question, how will you know when you've overcome imposter syndrome and self-doubt? I think that in a way you never fully do. It's just more percentage, but you never actually get to 100%. It's an asymptote for the math people out there.
I think part of it too is because you know what you know. You think you know what you know, and you don't know what you don't know, and you assume you don't know more than you know. You can play that one. You can replay that one if you got to. But I'm telling you, that one, believe it or not, that made sense.
It actually made sense to me too.
Right?
Strong.
I'll never. So one of the biggest fears people have is getting called out. What happens when that fear actually happens? So one day I posted something on social media and I was replying to some DMs, and somebody messaged me and they said, "Hey, no offense, I don't mean this with any negativity or any judgment, but what makes you qualified to be a coach?" And they said, again, "No, I'm not trying to judge you. I don't want to have an argument. I'm just genuinely curious." And I said, "That's an interesting question. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that before." And I said, "All right, let me think about it for a second before I respond." And I said, "Well, I've learned every day. I've intentionally learned from a book or an interview or coaching every day for the last, at this point, it was probably 2 years. I track my habits. I've studied hundreds, probably thousands of hours of personal development at this point. Alan and I had several hundred episodes." That's what I said back. I said, "These are the things. I'm obsessed with self-improvement. I study more than most humans. I've learned more than most humans. I faced so many mirrors. I've explored myself. I've learned. I've unlearned. I have been in this echo chamber for the last few years, and I've made this a part of my life." So the point I'm making here is, if somebody else called you out and said, "What makes you qualified to be a podcaster? What makes you qualified to be a speaker? What makes you qualified to be whatever it is, a website designer?" and you had to come up with a list of reasons why you're qualified, you'd be able to do it probably. Why don't you do it for yourself when you start doubting yourself? I've had those conversations. I have my little pep talks of, "Kev, you've done this 95 other times." Right? Today's week 96. Yeah. You've done this 95 other times, and it's always gone fine. Have there been Jeffings? Of course there have, right? Of course. Or when we get on the microphone, I have that little bit of, your story's not going to be that great. What if you don't add value? What if it just doesn't flow? I've done it 870 something other times. It's probably going to be fine. It's probably going to be fine. Look at the proof. So if somebody came up to you and said, "Hey, why are you qualified to do what you're doing?" you'd come up with answers. Start doing that for yourself. Start questioning yourself. When you start to have those doubts, I want you to list out the reasons why you're capable of doing what you're doing. I did this with a client the other day. My client said, "I don't know if I'm worthy of being a podcaster. What gives me the right to do it?" And I said, "I don't know. You tell me. What gives you the right?" And they listed off a bunch of things. Those are the reasons. And honestly, the odds of somebody calling you out are so slim. And if they do, you'll get an opportunity to flex that belief that you've been working on so hard behind the scenes. But that is an action for you out there right now. Where do you feel the most imposter syndrome or self-doubt? I want you to write a list of 10 things, 10 reasons 10 attributes, 10 examples of why you are qualified to be that, and really, really sit with it and stay there until you get 10. Don't do it if you're driving, obviously, but do it when you get home.
One thing I find really fascinating is when Kevin was asked that question, if not you, Kev, who should be giving advice?
Yeah.
It's so fascinating to me. Emilia and I were told by someone, you two have only been together for 2 years. You are not married. You don't have kids. What makes you think you can start a podcast on relationships? What makes you think that you can coach married couples on relationships? Mm-hmm. And we have 3 married couples that we coach, one of 16 years, one of 7 years, and one of, I want to say 6 years, and then one other couple that isn't married yet. And somehow the marriage makes it valid, even though every relationship is a marriage in a sense in some cases, or will be. And Emilia and I didn't really know how to react. And to be honest, it was fascinating because this person asking this has a far less incredible relationship than we do from my perspective. And I'll never forget this till the day that I die. And neither will Emilia. We were 2 weeks in and we were at one of my friends' 4-year-old or 3-year-old's party. And there was this person who saw us and saw the way we were. We'd only met 2 weeks prior to that, but Emilia and I were immediately unbelievably connected in ways deeper than, it's not about like the time, it's about the intensity and the depth, the iceberg underneath the water analogy here. So we went deep very quickly. And we also, I think love, yeah, it's corny, but the soul's recognition of alignment with its highest self and the soul's recognition of its counterpoint in another. And so I believe it's all for a reason beyond our current comprehension. And I knew that when I met Emilia, and she knew that as well. And only we can really know that, by the way. That's the other fascinating thing about this. But anyways, so this person has been married for 7 years and is very clearly unhappy. And they're like, when he found out that we hadn't been together for years, because for all he knew we were with the way we were acting like a married couple, because in many ways we already are in our consciousness. And he's like, oh, you guys only been together 2 weeks? All that'll fade. All that'll fade. Like the kissing and the cuddling and the hand holding and how sweet you are with one another, that'll all fade. Hey, brother, here we are 2 years and 2 months in, and none of it's faded. As a matter of fact, if anything, it's gotten amplified. It's even better. It's even more. It's even deeper, right? And this person doesn't know that in advance. So when that person asks you that, right, it's so fascinating because it's like, well, in 5 years, I'm gonna be heard in over 120 countries. Now can I give advice? Yeah. Does everyone see what's happening here? Now, do I have your permission to be an expert in the arena that I know I'm the expert in? Now, if you're not the expert, don't give advice. Right? But who is the expert, right? I'm not going to teach Serena Williams how to play tennis, but I can definitely teach someone who's never played. And that would help them amplify and accelerate the learning curve. So it's very, very important to understand this imposter syndrome and this self-doubt. Don't let these other people dictate what you should and shouldn't be, should and shouldn't try, can and cannot say. It really is important for you to just be honest with yourself and with your own mind, body, heart, and soul with what you know you're here for. And the people that you're giving advice to might be earlier in the journey. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And also have the humility. When someone is ahead of you, have the humility. Put on the student cap and start asking questions. It's a beautiful thing. So get around people who don't do what Kevin was referring to, who don't call you out and question you. I know that person wasn't malicious. I think they actually wanted to know.
They did. No, after I responded, they said, "Hey, thank you for that." It was awesome. A genuine conversation, so it was wonderful.
I know that some people aren't that way. That person genuinely wanted to know, probably because they were struggling with imposter syndrome and wanted to know how you overcame it. Yeah. But for the other people out there that are always giving you those kidney punches of like, what gives you the right? And early on, when I was, a coach, I was told, like, what gives you the right to be a coach? And now it's easy to say, well, I have 1,000+ coaching calls and 200+ speeches and 900+ podcasts and 700 team huddles. And we have a 14-person global team and we're heard in 120 countries and we're doing live events every year and I have 50+ clients. See, but at the beginning, when you're the most vulnerable, you have the least credibility. See, that's scary when you think about it. You want to know why dreams get killed? Because when you're the most vulnerable with the least amount of credibility, that's when other people come in and they crush your dreams. Don't let them crush your dreams. Only you know what you are capable of. And at least you should try. Don't let it stop you from trying. Because when you stop from trying, you don't face your fears. You don't feel fulfilled. You don't grow and learn. And Kevin and I very much could have listened to them and said, oh, okay, I guess we shouldn't coach now. Right? And so my point here is this. Get around people who lift you up. Don't be around the people who are constantly tearing you down. One quick story. I know we got to go soon. I went into the gym recently, and I ran into an old friend. And I've told this on the podcast before, but I want to give him credit. And his name's Nick, and he is just beyond in shape. The dude's just jacked. He looks like a goddamn superhero. And I'm so impressed. I am literally so impressed that I'm like, what are you doing, man? Like, what's different? I'm just picking his brain, right? And he sent me his pre-workout and different stuff. And so, but I realized this in this moment. I'm like, he was really excited to see me and really grateful for the honest praise that I gave. But I know this person's circle. And even if that entire circle was listening right now, this is what I would say. That circle that you spend time in is not in shape. Very few of them put the hours that you have put into fitness. So obviously they don't value being in shape as much as you do. If they did, they would also study fitness and be in the gym every day and be eating and tracking their calories. So just so you know, they're never going to value you and your physique at the level that I do. And I don't want you to be around people who are insecure about how in shape you are. I'd rather you be around people who lift you up. So this person does struggle with imposter syndrome and struggles with self-doubt big time. And I know one of the reasons why is because he puts himself in environments of people that are insecure around how in shape he is. Why wouldn't, if Kevin was around him and I was around him, we would do nothing but lift him up and we'd have admiration for how in shape he is. Versus other people that are not putting in the work and they know it are trying to probably avoid the topic of fitness. And Kevin and I were at an event in Colorado and we could tell the topic of fitness was avoided. And I know why. A lot of people in that room were not in shape, right? We tend to avoid our insecurities, and we've all been there, and I've been guilty of that too. I told that at the top here.
Imagine if you got the opportunity to interview one of the most successful entrepreneurs and authors and coaches and speakers in this space, and you jeffed the entire intro. You just jeffed the whole thing, and the camera was jeffed because we were using the camera for the first time. Imagine if you had the opportunity to interview somebody else who's very, very successful and very, very well connected and what felt like at the time a very big celebrity, and you jeffed their name not once, not only one time, but twice. So the first one, Dean Graziosi. Our camera was jeffed. I couldn't, for some reason, say multiple New York Times bestselling author. Couldn't say it. Don't know why. Whole thing was mangled. Number 2, Brant Pinvidic. I called him Brant Pindivic, and then I said it some other way another time. So what I have had to do, being in the public eye, you're going to make mistakes. After 900 episodes, you're going to misspeak. You're going to pronounce something wrong. It just is the way it is. I try to practice having a short memory. There are days where Alan and I have interviews with multiple people. We have multiple guests in the same day. If I make a mistake with one of those guests and in 2 hours we have another guest, I cannot be ruminating over that mistake. If you strike out your first at bat and you're thinking about that last strikeout, the odds you striking out again are pretty high. So if you're somebody who deals with self-doubt, you deal with imposter syndrome, get rid of that previous experience. Somebody asked me today, they said, when you meditate first thing in the morning, aren't you thinking about the prior day? And I said, no. When I start today, I'm not thinking about yesterday. I'm thinking about today. Everything from yesterday is kind of gone. I'm not ruminating on what happened yesterday. I'm not ruminating on the conversations I had. I'm doing my best to make sure that I get after it today and rebuild and continue momentum. So if you struggle with self-doubt, practice having a short memory. Don't overthink on the things that went bad and don't overfocus on the things that went well. Just get back to it. Just get back to it. That'll help you tremendously. If you're ruminating over the negative aspects, you're most likely going to make another mistake, honestly. Unfortunately, I wish it wasn't that way, but it is.
We've only got a couple minutes here, so I'm going to hammer these 2 last points very fast. The 2 points are this. You have to use self-doubt as fuel to be better. And I had a whole story planned for that one, but I already talked about using it as fuel. Don't take off the chip. Just run the chip. Don't let the chip run you. The chip on your shoulder. Okay? Yeah, I also love chips, for sure. Sour cream and onion.
Yes.
The last point here is I had this reverse engineering regret journal. So one of my favorite books, if you're a long-term listener to this show, is The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying by Bronnie Ware. We got to interview her. And after my car accident at 26, I found this book and it changed my life because the number one regret of the dying is I wish I had lived a life true to myself and not what others expected of me. But for the longest time, I had this journaling habit where I would reverse engineer regret. And I thought it was genius. And I think that, Kevin, you actually helped me come up with this.
I think I suggested this, in retrospect, wasn't the best.
And so every single day for, I think, 3 months, I was reverse engineering what I could have done better, which in theory sounds awesome because you want to get better, you want to get better, you want to get better. Here's the problem. I wasn't looking at what I was doing well. So it's Emilia's 26th birthday. This is a year and a half ago. And we're in Newport, and I'm just feeling really bad about myself. I'm having all this self-doubt and this weird, it felt really weird, not to mention I jeffed the Airbnb, and this place was like terrible. And we had to like clean it. It was terrible. So I jeffed the weekend a little bit. We ended up having a magnificent weekend, but she said, what's going on? And she and I, whenever something's off, she helps me mastermind about it to find the bug in the garden, for lack of better phrasing. And I had been reverse engineering regret constantly, but not looking at my wins. Fast forward a year and a half later, she came up with this idea 2 days ago. No, last night. We have a jar in the center of our table downstairs, and she calls it the self-love jar. And she said, if you're willing, there's these little sticky notes at the top of it with a pen. And she said, if you're willing, for the next month, I'd like you to write something you love about yourself down and put it in the jar. And she's going to do it too, and she is going to write something she loves about me too in it as well. And so we have, I think, 3 notes in there right now. I don't think she's done hers yet today. I'm going to go read them. I'm kidding. But this is the opposite of reverse engineering regret. This is what do you actually love about yourself? And now don't get me wrong. If all you're ever doing is thinking about how awesome you are, that's delusion as well. You have to improve, and you have to look at your mistakes, and you have to take ownership for where you can get better. But don't only focus on the bad. It's a balance. You got to focus on, okay, what could I have done better, but what am I doing well? And at NLU, we have 1% win, 1% improvement. 1% win, 1% improvement. All of us have that. It's called a performance review, and we all do it after we do our peak performance tracking. So the self-love jar is a really good idea. It's one way to overcome self-doubt. And the thing that I wrote about myself, the very first thing that I wrote about myself, I told Emilia this. I said, I think that the thing that I wrote that I love about myself most actually is the least valued by others, but the most valued by you. And so just remember, you might value yourself in a different way than the external world validates you. My favorite thing I'll tell everyone that I wrote down, I said, my desire to be the very best I can be every single day in every single way. My insatiable need to be better every single day. The best man I can possibly be, not just in one arena, but every arena that matters to me. Health, wealth, and love. That's what I love about myself most. That's what I revere about myself most. This is not about me. If you're watching or viewing this or listening to this, what is it that you actually love about yourself? I don't care what your parents think. I don't care what your teachers think. I don't care what your friends think. What I care about is, what do you value about you? Most likely, whatever that thing is a virtue, not a vice. And the world has probably tried to convince you that you're bad or wrong or whatever. So if you struggle with self-doubt, start focusing on what you truly do love about yourself. And I know that will start to flip the coin. So me, reverse engineering regret, only looking at the bad, made me super doubtful. And I'm one of the most confident people. I'm very confident typically. But I was very not confident back then because I was only focused on the negative. You can't just focus on the negative. You have to focus on your virtues and your strengths as well.
Next time I come over, I'm going to drop a wild card in the jar. something wild, something fancy. It'll be a nice surprise. Last thing, I'll say it really quick because we're already over. Sometimes your biggest weaknesses can translate into your biggest strengths. So if you're somebody who is terrified of underperforming because of lack of belief or imposter syndrome, use that as your prep. The first speech I gave, I did 4 or 5 dry runs, word for word through the entire thing with a timer. I knew exactly how long it was going to be when I finally did it. If you have imposter syndrome, you can turn that into prep, and that will get rid of a lot of it.